worthy. That's just the most important thing that we always need to get in mind, is that He is worthy. And that music, that song is powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I might have told you all this before, but you know, there's a woman that was one of our patients over in Knoxville that you know, she could barely speak. You know, she was high end stage dementia and different things like that. She could shake her head no, nod her head yes. She might say yes every once in a while, but she didn't really talk. And her family, you know, was struggling over that, you know, struggling with coming to terms with the fact that they couldn't communicate with her and such. And so I was going in and visiting with her, and the first time I went in to visit her, I always bring a hymnal with me, and I sing, you know, the hymns and the old songs with a lot of the patients and such. And come to find out, this lady used to sing in like a quartet. She used to travel around in the area and do a lot of group singing in churches and guest singing and such. And so when I started singing a song that she knew, guess what she started doing?
Singing.
She started singing.
Wow.
I mean, just word for word, right notes, whole sentences, everything. I mean, that's how much the music had been buried down in her mind, in her heart, in her soul, to where that she was able to get out and start singing, and they were just, their jaws just dropped. I mean, they got out their camera and they were like, wow, gotta film that. Because they hadn't seen it. They hadn't seen that from her in some time. And we were kind of like that the other day in the van. You know, we were driving up to take Gabriel back to college and such, and on the way back, and we were listening to music in the van that I hadn't listened to in years. But it was music that I had taught myself how to sing to, you know, really back in high school. And if you had asked me to sing any of that music, you know, beforehand, to tell you what the words were or whatever else, I couldn't have remembered a lick of it, hardly. But as soon as the music started playing, can y'all verify this? Was I able to sing most of it? Yeah. I mean, I was able to sing and remember almost every word, the right notes, and all that other kind of things. So even though I hadn't heard it in years, I still knew it. You know, I still knew the words, I still knew the song, I knew the story that it was trying to tell. I mean, all that stuff came back in an instant. That's how powerful music can and is supposed to be. Of course, that works both ways. It can be powerful for the things of God in our lives. Music can also be powerful for the things of the enemy in our lives, and we see that. And anybody who goes out there and tells you, like, oh, words don't matter, you know, it doesn't care, I'm not really listening to the words anyway, you know, all that stuff that you hear over the years and you tried to get away with as a kid, yeah, that's all bull.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it is impacting your spirit regardless of what you think it's doing. And that can be for good or for evil. So what you listen to matters. And music, it impacts our memory. It helps us remember times. It helps us remember friends and events. How many of y'all can listen to a song on the radio and it takes you back to where you were, like as a kid in high school, who your friends were? All of a sudden you can remember, oh yeah, I remember hearing this song when I was at the skating rink. Remember when those existed. And going around in circles listening to this song and all that other kind of stuff. It helps us remember friends, events, relationships, moods, emotions, all these things that it helps us remember how much we've grown and how much we've changed in life. The music does a lot of that stuff. So songs can even teach us lessons, help us remember important information. But you know, it really only works if you know the song. If you've never heard the song before, if it's not a part of your memory and things like that, it's not going to really help you all that much. Even if a song is played, you know, that, you know, it's when you were there in high school or whatever else, if it's played from the same year, maybe if it's the same artist, but you don't really know that song, it's not going to bring back the same kind of memories for you. So even if you're reading the words by themselves, this is one of the challenges that I have, you know, when I have these hymnals. And I'm reading these words, and I was like, I should know this song, but I don't know it. Until I can get the tune going in my head, I don't know the song. That's how it works for me a lot of times anyway. So even the reading the words doesn't help you remember as well as when you hear the music, can you think of how it flows together. So that's why it's important to learn the music of the song. If you don't, you might miss what's coming. And that's what really the chapter that we are reading about this week in this Torah portion is all about. It's the Song of Moses from Deuteronomy chapter 32. And you know, so you think about it, you never really think of Moses as being a songwriter. But we don't think about him like that because we don't know the song. We don't really know what the message is. We don't really know what he's trying to do and say. And when you think of the Song of Moses, okay, he wrote only one song, to all we know. At least one song that we're supposed to remember. So what do you think the purpose of the song is supposed to be? I mean, it helps us know, it's like, this is why he wrote it. And so you look back in the previous chapter, the previous Torah portion, it says, now I write this song for yourselves and teach it to the children of Israel, to Bnei Israel. Put it in their mouths so that this song may do what? It's supposed to serve as a witness. It may be a witness for me, for God, against Bnei Israel. All right? This song is to serve as a witness. But what happens if they never learn or remember the song? Is it going to be able to fulfill that purpose? Now, how many of y'all like to remember songs that's all about you in a bad way? Would you want to remember that song? Right? How many, when you sing songs to your kids when they're growing up, your grandkids or whatever else, do you sing them songs about how, oh, you're the meanest little kid I've ever known? No? Would you sing something like that? Would you want to get that in their head?
Yeah.
No. You sing happy things to them, right? You sing good things to them. You don't sing mean, degrading kind of things. And yet, this is going to serve as a witness against them, not necessarily for them. But it's going to be in there. It goes on in chapter 31, verse 22. It says, now, when many evils and troubles have come on them, how certain is that going to be? When the many evils and troubles have come on them, is that if this happens?
No, maybe.
It's a when kind of thing. Not an if, but when these evils and troubles have come on them. This song will confront them as a witness. In other words, when all this bad stuff starts happening, you're supposed to sing this song. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, that's why this is happening. This is supposed to be a reminder for you that when these things, bad things start happening, you're supposed to sing this song and come to mind, because it also gives a sense of what the problem is and what the solution is. So this song will confront them as a witness, for it will not be forgotten from the mouth of their descendants. So are we supposed to remember this song? Now we don't even know the tune anymore. I don't know if Israel, if Jewish people know the tune that this was supposed to be sung to. But he says, for I know the intention that they are devising this day, even before I bring them into the land that I swore. That day Moses wrote this song and taught it to Bnei Israel. So he knows already that they're intending, some of them are intending to break the covenant that they are just making. So it's supposed to serve as a witness for Adonai against Bnei Israel. It's supposed to explain God's faithfulness and Israel's unfaithfulness and the consequences of what's going to happen. It's supposed to testify for why these things are happening. It's supposed to tell them and explain what kind of evils and troubles are coming. And this song is also supposed to be revealing about their future, even about the end times, and even about the coming of Yeshua. It's all in this song. You look at the verse 29, he says, for I know that after my death You will certainly act corruptly and turn aside from the way I have commanded you. So evil will fall upon you in the latter days. Because you will do what is evil in the sight of Adonai, provoking him to anger by the work of your hands. That word latter days is a karith, or I'm probably not saying that correctly, but it means after part or an end, the issue, after some end issue or event, talking about some prophetic future time, this latter time. And its first usage was in Genesis 49 verse 1, where it says, "Then Jacob called his sons and said, 'Gather around, and I will tell you what will happen to you in the days to come.'" This is when he's offering his blessings to his children. And we understand that those are prophetic about not just the individual person, but prophetic about what? The tribes as a whole, right? His statements about them are reflective of who they are as a people in the future. So that word, that latter days word, shows up in the song. Because it's talking about the days that are in the future, days to come. Chapter 32, verse 20, he says, "I will hide my face from them. I want to see their hereafter, for they are an upside-down generation, children with no faithfulness in them." I want to see their latter days. And in those latter days, what is he saying might be going on? He's going to be hiding his face for them. And there's a reason for that he's doing that. It's also in verse 29. If they were wise, they would discern this. They would understand their hereafter. They would understand these future, these days to come, these latter days, these end times. They would understand. If they would discern them, how would they discern? What would help them discern the latter days and the end times? This song would help them. It helped them discern. So if it should help them, shouldn't it kind of maybe help us too? We should be able to have a better sense of what's coming and why, not just in their future, but in the future for this planet, for everybody on it, and what's happening and what's coming. So they're referring to future events, particularly the latter days. And why that's important is because this is why the Song of Moses is also being sung in the book of Revelation. It's in Revelation chapter 15. He says, "Then I saw another great and awe-inspiring sign in heaven, 7 angels with the 7 last plagues, for with them God's wrath will be completed. I also saw something like a sea of glass mixed with fire, and those who had won the victory over the beast, its image and the number of its name, were standing on the sea of glass with harps from God. They sang the song of God's servant Moses and the song of the Lamb." So, why would some obscure, former #1 song on the charts, this one-hit wonder Song of Moses, be sung in the book of Revelation? Why would it be paired with this idea of this Song of the Lamb? I mean, who listens to Jewish music anyway? Right? Why would they be singing this song? Do you understand that in the book of Revelation, which hasn't happened yet, despite what some people say, they're going to be singing a song that was written thousands of years ago. And that's something significant. But see, here's the problem. We don't know the song. We don't know what it means. We never hear the song. We never learn the song. So then we have no understanding of its message, of its meaning, of what it's supposed to bring to our mind. It's like, oh, this is what that's talking about. I remember this moment. We sing about it when we sing this song. We don't realize how Yeshua, our Messiah, is also in this song. You see that back in Deuteronomy chapter 32. He says, "Give ear, O heavens, and I will speak. Let the earth hear the words of my mouth. May my teaching trickle like rain, my speech distill like dew, like gentle rain on the new grass, like showers on tender plants. For I will proclaim Adonai's name. Ascribe greatness to our God. The rock, blameless is he. Blameless is his work. Indeed, all his ways are just. God of faithfulness without iniquity, righteous and upright is he." He's in there. Verses 1 through 14, when you look at this whole song, the first 14 verses talk about God's faithfulness, about his goodness, about his mercy. It establishes the case that God is not at fault in any of these situations. God is not at fault in this situation that the world finds itself in. He has provided everything. He has kept his side of the covenant promise. And so many people, they want to blame God for the evil in this world. So they ask, how could a good God permit or allow or do, all these things that is talked about in the song and all the things in Revelation and all that? To me, that sounds a lot like the criminal who blames the police for his getting arrested. Y'all ever hear those kind of things go on? The one who is resisting arrest complains that they're using force to subdue them. Or it's like the person, and you hear this happen in all sorts of situations and places, so I'm just using Dollywood as an example, but there are those people who climb over the fences and the warning signs to the restricted areas, all those places they have the signs up that say no admittance and all that other kind of stuff. They climb into those areas, they climb onto the ride, they fall, they break their leg, and then what do? They sue. They sue Dollywood for safety violations or whatever else. After they've done everything they could to prevent them from getting there, and they do it anyway out of their stupidity, but they still want to have fault in somebody else.
Usually win.
It's usually men?
No, they usually win.
Oh, they usually win. Okay. Well, it is usually men too, so that's besides the point. But imagine, or I'll pick on somebody else for a minute. Imagine the vegan person who goes to Longhorn Steakhouse and then complains to the manager about all the trauma of seeing other patrons eating meat. What did you expect was going to happen when you went there? All right? So there are so many things that God is wanting to try to communicate. But what his desire is he expresses this desire. Well, before I say that, that's why when you look at verse 5, it says, "Did all of this corrupt him? No. The blemish is his children's, a generation crooked and twisted." That's what's the problem. He has done everything he could, and yet he is not the one at fault. But what the Lord wants to do, he wants the world, he wants everybody to hear and be blessed by his word. Let the earth hear the words of my mouth. Then he says, "May my teaching trickle like rain, my speech distill like dew, like gentle rain on new grass, like showers on tender plants." So his word is compared to the falling rain. And what kind of rain is it? Is it what's that?
A gentle rain.
It's a gentle rain. So this isn't a downpour. This isn't like a thrashing of rain, which you can see out there in places. So that's what his word is supposed to be for his people who are receiving it. And what is Sukkot supposed to be? What's one of the elements of Sukkot? A celebration. What do you pray for during this time? We pray for rain, don't we? And it's not just physical rain that we're praying for. We're praying for the rain of his word, the rain of all his teachings, all his things to be made to come to life in his people. That's what we're hoping for. We're praying for rain in the sense of also seeing all of these things that he's promised come to pass, be fulfilled. So Sukkot is a celebration of the coming of and the prayer for the coming of the rains, which is seen as a blessing. And I know we would love to have more rain right now. But this is how he wants to communicate his teachings and his instructions. Like the blessing it is, the gentle rain, the dew on the new grass, the showers on the tender plants. He will treat us tenderly when we receive what he bestows readily, willingly, eagerly. If we will receive it, he will do so gently, patiently with us. When he speaks and we declare the greatness of God, when we proclaim his name, when we have the attitude of, all that the Lord says, we will do. Right? That's if we all received his instruction and his teaching like that, it would be a blessing. Things go so much better for us when we receive his teaching the first time, and he doesn't have to start repeating himself. Right? Isn't that typically go better in your household? That you don't, once you have to start repeating yourself, then it starts to escalate a little bit, doesn't it? Right? What happens when we don't want to receive his word? Well, what starts as a gentle rain and dew might have to get a little stronger, a little heavier, more powerful. If only we would receive his teaching and his instructions so willingly, if only we would hunger and thirst for him and his righteousness, then we wouldn't need the storm, the heavy rains, the flooding, and the thunder like we tend to get. And so here the Israelites they're all living in tents out in the wilderness where nothing is settled, everything's unstable. What kind of rain do you want to have when you're out living in a tent without real secure shelter? Which would you prefer?
Gentle rain.
You prefer the gentle rain. You don't want the wind blowing really hard when you're living in your tent. Why not? Because it might blow over your tent, right? It's like your house that's been built on the sand kind of a thing. When the floods come, it's going to knock it over. We want things to be the right way. And so here the Lord, he wants to lay this good foundation. So he teaches his people, even during their times of the wilderness experiences and through their struggles, because so many times he does that because that's when we're most receptive. We're most willing to receive his word in those wilderness experiences because that's when we call out for him the most, when we are struggling, when we're most willing to receive his instruction, when we're most dependent upon him. But here also is why this passage is connected to the Song of the Lamb, why this song is about Messiah. This word here, the rock, blameless is he. It's the word, it's the Strong's number H6697. It's tzur, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Its first usage comes all the way back in Exodus chapter 17. Believe it or not, it's connected all the way back to Moses when they were looking for water in the wilderness. The Lord answered Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take the staff that you struck the Nile with in your hand and go. I am going to stand there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. When you hit the rock, water will come out of it and the people will drink." Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. So the first time they came to the rock was struck and this living water came out. Of course, this also is the same word that's used up later when Moses goes to the rock again. But what's interesting about this one, this is why I was late this morning, getting here, is because I started seeing all this stuff. It's like, I got to talk about that. So when you look at this, look on the rock at Horeb. Anybody want to guess how this word is translated in the Septuagint?
Word rock?
Mm-hmm.
Petrus.
That's Petros,
Oh,
which is kind of an important New Testament word.
yeah.
It's used in Matthew chapter 16. This is the conversation that Yeshua is having with Peter. when Peter comes out and he asks him that question, who do people say that I am? But what about you? And he says, you are the Messiah, the Mashiach, the Son of the living God. And Yeshua responds, he says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, which is Petros, which is like a small stone. You are Petros, and on this rock, Petra, which is like a large, immovable type of stone, boulder, mountain type of a thing. On this rock, Petra, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. So do you think John knows what that word means? I'm sorry, what Matthew, do you think Matthew knows what that word is connected back to in Jewish thought? Do you think he knows the Septuagint and which word that they use? Yeah, I think he does. I think he does. Because this rock is understood, in Jewish thought. This is the regular thinking within Jewish thought. And so he's understood to be the Messiah with them in the wilderness. And the New Testament confirms this idea in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. He says, for I do not want you to be ignorant, brothers and sisters, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea. They were all immersed into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock, Petros, that followed them, and the rock, Petra, was Messiah. Paul did not invent that concept. That was not something brand new. That was something that was already, from what I understand, already in their literature, already in their writing, already in their concepts, that the rock that was with them in the wilderness is a representation of Messiah. So the first time they came to the rock was struck and the living water came out. And that's significant because that's a picture of the first coming of Yeshua, of Messiah. That he's rejected, that he's struck, and that the living water is poured out in that sense. So, and also when the glory of the Lord passed by Moses, when he's up on the mountain, God hid him in the crevice of the rock, the cleft of the rock, and covered him over. That's the same word. Whenever the Israelites went, wherever they went, this rock provided water for the people. And the second time, Moses was supposed to just do what? Instead of striking the rock again, he was supposed to speak to it, Devar. He was supposed to acknowledge, he was supposed to announce, he was supposed to proclaim to the rock that the rock is here and the water was supposed to come out. Instead, he struck it again. He struck it twice, So Jewish thought understands that this rock, not only the rock is Messiah, but they see that this rock is more than even Messiah. They see this rock as God, his presence with them. And for those who question the deity of Messiah, this is some evidence that this rock was understood to be God. Look at Deuteronomy, the rock, Tzur, blameless is his work. Indeed, all his ways are just. God of faithfulness, without iniquity, righteous and upright is he. Okay, I forgot to space this out. When you look at the Septuagint, again, this is 200 to 250 BC when the Septuagint was written and put together. Look at how the Septuagint translates this word. Y'all can read that, right?
Yeah.
Greek?
Sure.
Everybody can read that?
Yeah.
Well, so this one is theos, God. But look how they translate this one.
Yeah, interesting.
Look there. It's the same word.
Deuteronomy 32
Mm-hmm.
in the Septuagint.
Yeah, in the Septuagint. And they do this multiple times in this song. When the Septuagint translates the rock in this song, they almost always use this one. I haven't found one where they didn't. That's pretty interesting because it's also in verse 18. The rock, Tzur, who birthed you, you ignored. You forgot God who brought you forth. And the same thing. Theos. They understood this rock is representative of God, but they also thought that this rock was Messiah. How does that work? Right? So if God is the rock in Jewish thought, and the rock is also understood to be Messiah, and all of these descriptions are of of God, but they're also descriptive of Messiah. I mean, it's the rock, blameless. If you think of rock, God, blameless is his work, and all his ways are just. Isn't that true of Messiah? Blameless is the Messiah's work. And indeed, all the Messiah's ways are just. Isn't the Messiah faithfulness without iniquity? Righteous and upright is the Messiah. Right? All of those things are true of him. What does that say about the nature of Messiah? It's understood that many Jewish people in the days of Yeshua were expecting a divine Messiah. That was not an outlandish concept. They weren't dead set against that idea. Guess when those ideas started becoming hard hit? No, we don't believe that. After Yeshua came, after some of the distortions and things and all the hostility between Jew and Gentile started coming up within the church. And when you see this in the New Testament, when you see Yeshua and other statements like, well, who can forgive sin but God alone? And what the issue is like, wait a minute, Messiah, Yeshua, he's saying your sins are forgiven. And they had a problem with that because only God can do that. But Yeshua also does that. How can Messiah be greater than David, who said, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies my footstool? How can one like the Son of Man sit on the throne and be the judge? If that's Messiah, because who's the only one who can really sit on the throne and be the judge? That's God. How can that be Messiah? So they had these concepts already within their understanding. This rock was Messiah. And Messiah was to be struck the first time he came as Messiah ben Joseph, but announced and recognized as Messiah ben David the second time he comes. That's what it was supposed to be, a picture of. But, we understand that when you look at this passage, God is justified in all that he does. That's the stuff that I really got having to spend a lot of time on this morning. But he's justified in all he does. He is in the right in all of this situation. Now, all of this song, and he is not the one at fault in the way that this world is going. Verse 5 we looked at, the fault is with his children. Verse 6, he says, is this how you pay back Adonai? Is this how you pay back the Lord, O foolish and unwise people? Isn't he your father who ran you? He made you and established you. Verse 7, it says, remember the days of antiquity. Understand the years across generations. Ask your fathers, and he will tell you, your elders, and they will say to you. All right? What are they supposed to know in the future generations when they're trying to figure all this stuff out? They're supposed to know this song of Moses. They're supposed to be able to look back on these experiences that they have. If we lose sight of this truth, if we forget these things, that he is the one who has established us, he is the one who makes us, he is the one who ransoms us. If we forget, if we never learn the song, then we have to make a greater effort to go back and seek the knowledge and wisdom of the past, of what the fathers have said. Our hearts have to be turned back to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See, that's part of the problem with us in the modern world, is we tend to think that we're the only ones that have any intelligence at all. It's called a modernity bias, that we're the smartest people that ever walked the earth. We've invented the best stuff that nobody in the past really knew how to do squat. That they're just a bunch of barely out of the cave kind of savages walking around compared to us. And yet, there's a lot of things that they were able to do and accomplish and build that we still don't know how they pulled it off. Right? We need to go back and seek that wisdom, seek that knowledge. You know, and when you look through and you read through this song from 8 to 14, it says, you know, when Elion gave nations their heritage, when he separated the sons of man, he set boundaries for the people by the number of Bnei Israel. And that's very similar language to what we read in Acts chapter 18, when Paul is in Athens. Is it 17 or 18? But he says, but Adonai's portion is his people. Jacob is the share of his inheritance. He found him in the wilderness land and in the void of a howling waste. He surrounded him, cared for him, guarded him as the pupil of his eye, as an eagle stirs up its nest and hovers over its young. He spreads his wings, catches him, lifts him up on his pinions. Is God doing everything for them? Mm-hmm. Yes. He says, Adonai alone guided him. There was no foreign god with him. Nobody else contributed to their situation. Nobody else contributed to their status, to their position, to where they are. God and God alone did all of this. He said, he made him mount on the heights of the land, so he ate the produce of the field. He suckled him with honey from a rock and with oil from a flinty boulder. Butter of cattle and milk of a flock, with fat of lambs, rams of the Bashan, and the he-goats with fat and the kidneys of wheat, and blood of grapes you drank. All right, so he is doing everything for them. The Israelite people were set apart. They were chosen. They were given this special place and this position in God's plan. God did everything right. All he did was just. All he did was blameless, righteous, and upright. But things began to change because fault was found in the children. And you see that in verse 15. But Jeshurun grew fat and kicked. You got fat. You grew thick. You gorged. All right, that's not very pleasant statement. He forsook God who made him. He mocked who? The rock. And so mocking who? God himself. And mocking ultimately who? Messiah, Yeshua. Right? They made him jealous with strangers, with abominations. They angered him. They sacrificed to demons, non-gods, gods they had not known, to new ones who came in lately, ones your fathers had not dreaded. The rock who birthed you, you ignored. You forgot God who brought you forth. Right? It's kind of like somebody who shows up. You've been working all day. You've been toiling on a particular job or out in the field or whatever else like that. You've been working all day, and somebody shows up at the last minute, picks up a hammer, hits the rock one time or whatever else, and takes credit for all the work that's been done. They're going after these other gods and all these other kind of things that had nothing to do with where they are. So as the Israelites grew fat, they grew comfortable, they were protected. That can only happen in the protection of God's care. They began to take him for granted. And so they are going after these other gods, the new and trendy kind of things, the old things that they were supposed to be separated away from. Anything but the God of their fathers, anything but the one who actually did everything for them. They ignored and rejected and mocked the rock of their salvation, the God of their salvation, Yeshua, the Messiah. And what we also have to keep in mind, that was future as far as this is concerned, but we also have to remember that this is not just talking about, from our perspective, the past. This is supposed to be stuff about the latter days, the end days, right? Remember that word we looked at earlier? This is still going on today. Mm-hmm. Israel has become a greatly prosperous nation and people, right? Many identify ethnically as Jews, but do they believe in the God of their fathers? Many do not. Many are secular or atheist. Many have adopted the beliefs or non-beliefs of every religious system and people. Many still, to this day, mock the rock. They mock Messiah, Yeshua. And what the danger is that will bring on everything else that this song describes because it's coming. And Revelation confirms that. The fact that this is in Revelation confirms that this is in the days ahead. All of these hardships that you start reading about in verse 21 and goes all the way through verse 43, all of those things parallel the bowls and the judgments and things that are poured out in Revelation, particularly chapter 15. They are all parallel. Some of the language might be a little different, but it's the same type of things. We've seen the Israelites targeted and vexed by the nations, haven't we? That's verse 21. They made me jealous with a non-God. They vexed me with many airy idols, so I will make them jealous with a non-people. With a foolish nation, I will vex them. We're still seeing that, aren't we? We have seen the Israelites targeted and vexed. We know that famine, plague, pestilence, and poison, they're all described in Revelation, isn't it? Isn't that all how some of those things are talked about? That's in 23 and 24. We've seen the Israelites trust in all sorts of saviors, all sorts of rocks, from false messiahs like Bar Kokhba to even these new messiahs that are vying for followers today that they're still trying to encourage. But one thing we realize is all those new things that they're going after, all of those things that they're trying to trust in, surely their rock is not like our rock. Their God is not like our God. Their Messiah is not like our Messiah, as even our enemies judge. They are seeing it. See, in the latter days, the nations will come against Israel, against the Jewish people, against the people of God, and he will use those nations as instruments of judgment against those who have forgotten him. And if they know the song, they'll see it, they'll understand it, they'll recognize it. Verse 29, if they were wise, they would discern this. They would understand their hereafter. They would understand those types of things. They know the mistakes that they are making and what will happen because of it and what will have to change in order for things to be made right. But we don't know this song anymore. It's not taught. It's not sung. It's not a part of most of our lives and upbringing as believers in the church and all that kind of stuff. We don't believe it. And there's a lot of us that don't believe anything like this will come to pass anymore in the future. We talk about Israel as if they are, invincible at this point. As if there's not going to be another moment of defeat. Most of us in Messiah are even convinced that it will only go well for Israel forever. But that's not what Revelation talks about. That's not what is coming. Because something has to bring on the time of Jacob's trouble, which is supposed to be the worst ever. Something has to cause the people of God to flee to the hills. Remember, God is justified in doing this. He is right in doing this. He will not allow for any other God, any other rock, any other Messiah to occupy the hearts of the people of God. That's what he says in verse 36. For Adonai will judge his people. For his servants he will relent. When he sees that strength is gone and no one is left, slave or free, and he will say, where are their gods, the rock that they took refuge in? What is it that they've been depending on all this time that they thought was doing all of this for them? Where is it? He's going to prove them wrong. All right, he says, who ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their libation? Let them rise up and help you and be a shelter over you. See now that I am He. There is no other gods beside me. I bring death and give life. I have wounded. What's the solution? I have wounded, but I will heal. I will restore. No one can rescue from my hand. None of the things that they've been trusting in, none of the things not how great in their military is, not how well organized they are, nothing will do that. He is wounded, but He will also heal. And all these nations and things that are coming against Him, all these things that are being used as instruments of judgment and vexing and all these other kind of things, they also need to, in knowing the song, know that those nations will also be held accountable for how they treat His people. That's verse 43. Make His people rejoice, O nations, for He will avenge the blood of His servants. He will return vengeance on His foes and atone for the land of His people. Yes, all of this stuff is going to be happening. Yes, it's not going to be pleasant. But what is He always trying to get to the point of? He's always trying to get to the point of holiness. He's always trying to get to the place of devotion and loyalty to Him. And all those that have done the evil against them are going to be held accountable for those things. And then ultimately, what is the point? He says, I will make, he's talking about a making of arrows drunk from blood, from my sword will devour flesh. That's all stuff in language that's very similar to what we read in Revelation. But then we see in verse 44, it says, Then Moses came and spoke all the words of this song in the ears of the people, he and Joshua son of Nun. When Moses finished speaking all these words to all Israel, he said to them, Put in your hearts all the words that I call as witness against you today. So what does he want them to do? He wants them to remember the song. He wants that to be ingrained in them so that nothing that happens catches them off guard. Nothing really should surprise them. He says, put this as all these words in your heart that I call as witness against you today, that you may command your future, your children, to keep and do all the words of this Torah. What's the solution? If you don't like this message, if you don't like the song and what it has to say about your future, what do you need to do? Command your children to keep and do all the words of this Torah. For it is not an empty thing for you, because it is your life. And by this word, by His Torah, all those things, you will prolong your days on the land which you are crossing over the Jordan to possess. All this stuff that you just heard, that you think, man, that's awful, I don't want to go through that. Here's your solution. Keep the words of this Torah, and you'll live. You'll experience all these things, all the blessings, the gentle rains, all the things that He wants us to experience. And that's ultimately what the kingdom will be. It will be the blessing. It will be those times of where there is no other God, and our loyalties are fully and completely upon Him, and we're not divided. Won't that be a great and glorious day? It's going to be tough to get there. There's a lot of things that still have to happen, and with all the things going on in the news from Turkey, Syria, Iran, we're seeing pieces move in place that haven't been in place before. So be looking towards the east, so to speak, keeping our eyes on what the Lord is doing, because as Thessalonians tells us, we're not supposed to be in the dark. as the people of God to when these things start happening. When they start proclaiming peace and safety, right?
Yeah, right. So destruction.
Destruction is right at the door. Right? There's going to be a lot of promises made, but there's not going to be, it's only, no one can rescue them from the hand of the Lord. That's what he says. So, that's the song. And we need to start learning the song and start watching for what the song has to say. Let's have a word of prayer together.